1191, during the Third Crusade, Richard the Lionheart ordered 3,000 people to be taken outside the gates of the city and slaughtered. Most of those people were women and children, many of which were disemboweled slowly for information, and the remains searched for gems they might have swallowed. All throughout the 12th century, the search for Albigensian heretics leads into the Inquisitions that tore through the majority of Europe. Pope Innocent IV told Dominican priests who were interrogating people to use torture to get them to confess to disbelief, and give up the names of other people who were disbelievers. During these interrogations, people were stretched, broken, burned and pierced on sadistic torture machines until they gave up all the people they knew that were not worshipping Christ. Many Jews and Moors converted to avoid persecution. In Spain, the search for people who still held on to their old beliefs led to the burning of nearly 2,000 people, most of which were scientists, mathematicians, astrologers. In the year 1209, nearly 20,000 people in southern France in the town of Béziers, following what were believed to be Albigenses Christians, who taught their followers math and science, gematria and astrology, were first blinded, tortured, used as target practice, dragged behind horses, and mutilated at the order of Pope Innocent III from the 1400s to the 1700s. The focus of the Inquisition was shifted to witchcraft, where anywhere from 100,000 to 2 million people were hanged or burned at the stake after being found guilty. Those who were accused of witchcraft or having sex with the devil were tortured into confession. This madness lasted for nearly 300 years. Most of the victims included anyone who studied science, sacred geometry or astrology.
This would have been a pretty rough time to be living in.
Half of the people that you know today were dead tomorrow. You couldn't even bury them all.
Monasteries became some of the most important institutions in Europe. They were centers of commerce, centers of political authority. This is where the action was.
In the violent and anarchic conditions of the period, there was virtually nobody outside of the ranks of the clergy who was still literate.
These artifacts come from all over Europe. Most of them date back to the 16th century.
Puma Punku in the highland of Bolivia. It's as if only master builders were allowed to work there.
And together they make up what could be the creepiest collection in the world.
Once you look at the devices, it's a very sobering moment.
From the interrogation chair to the infamous Iron Mask, it's chilling to know these torture devices were made after the Dark Ages.
If you were a blasphemer, that's when your tongue would be yanked.
The collection, which contains more than 250 items, will be put up for sale by Guernsey's auction house on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
You look at some of these intricate little objects that on the surface have a certain charm to them until you realize what their purpose was, which was to cause great pain.
Little objects like the Spanish pear.
This brutal device was intended to be inserted into the mouth, have the handle turned, and these four items, these leaves would pop open
a mouth,
destroy your teeth, and pretty much destroy the inside of your mouth.
Or other body parts.
This was designed to fit over your hand like a glove, and the whole thing was then placed in hot irons.
Some of the items, like the torture table, have to be kept in a warehouse.
If the ropes weren't enough to stretch you out, there were big spikes in the middle that puncture you.
Once you step away from their television programs and their newspapers and their Bibles, it becomes very clear why they have implemented these religions. They use them to stage false attacks in which they can then use the followers against each other for the purpose of erasing history, to keep their control a secret. For example, in 1215, the doctrine of transubstantiation given out by the Fourth Lateran Council stated the host wafer during Mass actually transformed into the body of Christ. They then used this to spread rumors that the Jews were stealing the wafer to obtain the satisfaction of crucifying Christ again. The followers of the new sign then helped them round up all of the people who had knowledge of the things they were doing and killed them. This particular incident led to the death of thousands of Jews that knew about great technologies they had used to conquer the people of the past.
Often described as the world's first mechanical computer, it dates back over 2,000 years.
The Antikythera device was found in 1900 by sponge divers diving off a small island in the Aegean called Antikythera. There was a shipwreck there, and in it was a coral-encrusted box, and it was made of metal alloys. And it then went to the Athens Museum, where a good 50 years later, they were able to X-ray this box, and they were able to discern cogged wheels that were interconnected and give us a very good depiction of what this thing was. And it is a computer. It's a really sophisticated machine.
It's a very interesting piece of technology because it served two purposes. One was that it was an astronomical device where you could, by using it, chart your position to the stars and navigate your way through the seas. It was also an astrological device so that someone could tell you, if you were born on this date and your planet sign is this, then certain things are going to happen to you when the planets are in this alignment. So it was a very interesting piece of technology that literally had more complicated gears and inner workings than a modern-day Swiss watch. And it's found to be dated, I think, like 200 BC, so it's really an anomaly as to who could have created that and what it was being used for.
When archaeologists first started examining this thing in the 1950s, they said that they never could conceive of the ancient Greeks having such complicated machinery. And in fact, they said this was tantamount to finding a jet airplane in the tomb of King Tut.
It is written in ancient Egyptian texts, the purpose why the pyramid was built was to store knowledge.
These things were built at the end of one of the destructions of the world.
In 1694, the money changers for this bloodline were given a square mile of property to run their banking system in what is now known as the inner city of London and the Bank of England. The bank was originally constructed above the ancient temple of Mithras, the religion that was assigned by this bloodline to this territory in the age of the ram. This is Mithras, the hero killing the bull. One of the most well-known of these money changers, and a direct descendant of the bloodline of God, went by their new last name, Rothschild.
Now let's take a look at the role of the Rothschild family, the family said to be the wealthiest in the world. When Amschel Meyer Bauer inherited the business, he decided to change his name to Rothschild. Mayer Rothschild had 5 sons. He trained them all in the skills of money creation, then sent them out to the major capitals of Europe to open branch offices of the family banking business. His first son, Amschel Meyer, stayed in Frankfurt to mind the hometown bank. His second son, Solomon, was sent to Vienna. His third son, Nathan, was clearly the most clever. He was sent to London at age 21 in 1798, 100 years after the founding of the Bank of England. His fourth son, Karl, went to Naples, and his fifth son, Jacob, went to Paris. Rothschilds soon grew unbelievably wealthy. By the mid-1800s, they dominated all European banking. They financed Cecil Rhodes, making it possible for him to establish a monopoly over the diamond and gold fields of South Africa.